Hey, folks, welcome to the Beer Garden. This is your landscape industry podcast that lasts as long as it takes to enjoy your favorite beverage. Today, we have a special guest with us, Benji Carlson. Excited to have him on board. Benji's background, he built a highly successful college pro painters franchise where he earned accolades for having the most productive staff in that network. He acted as the assessment specialist at Breakthrough Academy, eventually transferring over to the content lead. He's worked closely with over 1,500 contractors across North America, and he's the host of the Contractor Evolution Podcast, where he has interviewed hundreds of high performers like Chris Voss, Luke Hansen, Tommy Mello, Mark Bradley, and Kory Ballard, among many others. So it makes him the perfect guest to discuss our topic today, which is the 12 habits of high-performing entrepreneurs. With that, I always like to start with a little introduction to what we're drinking. I'm going to kick it over to you, Brandon.
Oh, the ever-popular Corona Extra again. That's like the third time in a row. You know me. You know what I like.
You're simple,
Benji,
man.
what are you drinking?
I'm doing a friggin' like lame-o sober September thing. But so I'm on the bubblies, which I will say is an inferior product to the, if you've ever had an AHA. In terms of like the hierarchy of bubbly drinks, sort of soda water, it's AHA at the top, bubbly is sort of a distant second, and then you have your soda stream people down here. So,
where's San Pellegrino on that?
San Pellegrino is sort of upper third maybe, but losing traction with these new entrants to the market. What I was going to say is the pineapple bubbly is unreal. If you've had the cherry bubbly, you don't like it. The blackberry one, you're not your fan. This one is really, really good. Yellow can. You can get it, I think, a 24 pack at Costco right now for like $12. So there you go. By the way, I wanted to say the intro was extremely hype, guys. I'm like fired up. I feel like I need to pop a bottle and go to a nightclub.
Right?
That's what we're doing.
Well, that's exactly what we're going through. That footage actually came from you and Matt down in Denver. Much of that footage.
Okay, I will expect a royalty.
Is that?
Yeah,
I will expect a royalty check in the mail then.
I'm drinking today the Great Divide Titan IPA, which should come as no surprise. Brandon always goes with the simple, watered down beer, and I pretty much always choose the IPA. Cool story about Great Divide. Great Divide has a beer called the Yeti. It's like an imperial stout that they always add all these different flavors to and crazy concoctions. But in Denver at their brewery, they do this Girl Scout cookie pairing where you can go in and have the different Yetis with Girl Scout cookies. And they have these Girl Scouts that will just show up out front, just slinging cookies, and they just crush. Like they're just like monsters. They like, I've never seen any other like Girl Scout clean up the way they do. A bunch of drunk dudes in a brewery. It's awesome.
Are these like actual 8-year-old Girl Scout cookies? These are like
100%.
These aren't waitresses girls dressed up as Girl Scout cookie people.
No, we're talking like
authentic.
Like legit 8-year-old Girl Scouts with their parents set up in the corner of this brewery, just slinging cookies.
That's awesome.
Incredible.
It's very Denver.
It is very Denver.
Let's dive in. You want to start with the list?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's number one.
Let me just do one other. Let me just sort of give a little bit more context, a little bit more credential building. Because right now it's like what we're talking is just some dude with a bubbly in his kitchen. I think your audience is going to be like, why is this guy qualified to speak about this? So the short answer is I'm not. But if I had to make a case for it, and I will, it is that over the last 7 years, like with Breakthrough Academy, and what we do is advise and coach blue collar businesses. We help them systemize. We help them grow. I've done about 1,200 business assessments. That's what Jason was alluding to, where I literally just sit down for 2 hours. We look at their P&L. We look at their org chart. We look at their strategy. We talk about their goals. We talk about their weaknesses. And we basically make a determination on whether or not the Breakthrough Academy, this coaching program that we have, is going to work for them. And lots of the time it does. And sometimes it's maybe not the right thing. And that was sort of my role. And so I'm saying that to say, it's a pretty large sample size in terms of like, when I hear these things or see these things, these people tend to do, I can sort of plot it on a graph. These people tend to do well. These people tend to really struggle. And these people tend to nosedive. So I just, little bit of extra perspective on where this list comes from.
Fair. And I'll add that like after that assessment, you Like you stay in contact with these businesses. They're
totally, and we'll work with them for years.
Right. So you get to see how they actually did. I'd hate to see how Brandon and I scored on that assessment.
He didn't do mine. That was my in. It was Igor and I met James. A couple of the owners. I met James at like a Five Guys fries to sign my contract. I was very early on.
Classy. Yeah. Okay, so 12 habits. I'm just going to dive right in and we can chat about these.
Yeah.
Number one was not going to surprise you, but when it comes to like really high performing contractors, men and women that build big businesses, make a lot of money, create a situation where they have some freedom for themselves, one thing that they're all extremely religious about is their priority in time management. And I think that, you'll see a lot of other content creators or podcasts talk about managing your time. I don't think this is necessarily a profound comment, but the spin I would put on it for this audience is, I think because of the nature of a landscaping business or a construction business or a plumbing business where you're dealing with physical reality, not just spreadsheets and binary code and software, you're dealing in reality with emotional customers, with weather, with supply chains, with, variably reliable or unreliable staff and sub crews. These businesses just are fundamentally more reactive than other businesses. And if you are listening and you have a friend that like owns a coffee shop or a bakery or is in business for themselves in some other vertical, I'm sure you've felt that where you're like, man, that seems like a lot simpler to just schedule and project manage and whatever. So where I'm going with this is there's a lot of like excuse making around time management. I can't build a block schedule because I wouldn't be able to follow it. Sure, I can plan out my day, but it's going to go to shit anyway. So why bother in the first place? And I get that because I've certainly been in that sort of crisis zone before, but I'm saying objectively what I've observed is the really high performers have a very, very structured schedule where the little things connect with the big things and their bigger goals. And even though the dynamic environment is changing all the time, they're always kind of rearranging and reorganizing where they spend their time to make sure that it is still connected with the bigger picture vision instead of just running around with the chicken with their head cut off. So that would be the first thing. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that.
I think you're exactly right. And like that kind of objection that you mentioned, which it's all going to go to shit anyways, is pretty much always the first thing I always heard. This is something we try to coach like our leadership team on, and then kind of through our organization on time and priority management. But I think a lot of people are missing the priority management part of that statement, time and priority management. Like they're just thinking, oh, I'm going to just take all the shit that I do in a day and put it on a calendar and that's it.
Right.
It's like, no, you're going to prioritize what you work on first and make sure, to your point, that it matches with the bigger picture, the vision, the end goal, wherever you're going. And those are the things that you carve out time for in your calendar. So that inevitably, when those things do come up, the fires, those other things, like you have a visualization of the things that you're sacrificing when you go to deal with those fires. Some of them you have to, but B, like it's got a spot on your calendar. Bump it back then. You spent half an hour dealing with that fire, bump it back by half an hour, make room for it somewhere. So I think the priority management part is a big piece of that.
Totally.
I think like not doing it, you just, especially early on in business for me, you just settle into the things that you're good at and you go out and be the hero and solve the fire with the customer, or go and do that job that your techs missed for the day, or whatever it might be, instead of implementing a scheduling system or doing some other boring computer work. So when you start to actually do priority management and you sit there, I like to do it just first thing Monday morning, just make a list of everything I have to do. It's very simple. I literally use like a paper notepad still to this day. And it doesn't have to be fancy Asana or any software. Just I sit there, make my list, put my highs on there, mediums and lows, and that's what I have to hit that week. And if I don't, I'll just start reacting to the day-to-day stuff that's kind of fun, and I kind of want to do. There's a lot of crap on that list that's marked as high that I don't want to do. They're tough conversations. They're all the things that that move the business forward, though, and the things you really need to do. So sitting there with a clear mind, just doing priority management is one of the things that's helped me tremendously.
Yeah, I think it's an important distinction to make between like time and priority management, and I can describe it very quickly. Like prioritization is fundamentally about understanding a fairly fixed, fairly non-moving goal or vision that you have for your business in the future, and changing what you do over the very short term based on the changing dynamic of the short term to make sure that what you're doing still connects with this bigger thing. Like, I think we all have this, especially like younger business owners have this idea that they're going to like go to a cabin in the woods and they're going to plan out the whole year and it's just going to be laid out brick by brick. And then they're just going to go and execute. And like, if you've been in business for a week, you understand that that's not like, it doesn't work like that. You can have these fairly larger initiatives that are maybe chunkier pieces that you're going for, but you have to constantly be jockeying and sort of changing based on what reality gives you. And so I think that's where, and then time management, just to close this out, that's just basic scheduling. It's like get Google Calendar and plunk stuff in and move it around when you need to, and try to be punctual and trying to end stuff on time so you can get to the next thing. And you need both, but I think a lot of people think that they'll just sort of go to Chapters and buy a fancy Moleskine schedule, or they'll download Google Calendar and then problem solves. And I just think it's a little deeper than that.
One last learning I had was I got the Moleskine nice notepads, and I found I didn't want to write shit in it because it was so nice. I thought like, these can only be my best ideas. This is like a $20 notepad. So these cheap fucking memo pads, I just trash these things. I would highly recommend. Don't be too cute about it. You don't need fancy software or anything. We run a company with 50 employees on this notepad.
Paper. I do the back of a lot of envelopes that come in the mail. Never open the letter, just write lists on the back of it.
No.
Okay, number two. Speaking of, number two, what did I say? Uber clear. They have an uber clear vision for the future and what they want. Now, I'm going to make like a bit of an aside here and say that I think that Gino Wickman is like a really genius guy, and Traction's a great book, but I think that the idea of a visionary has become grossly overpopularized. And I think I'm going to get some hate for saying this, but if you meet someone at a trade show and they introduce themselves as the visionary of their company, you're talking to an idiot. Like, that is a fact.
I'm the visionary of my company.
So when Brandon comes and introduces himself as the landscapers by nature, you can remember this. Being a visionary is a role in a business, an incredibly important one. But I just think people like the way it sounds and have used it pretty liberally as a label, and they kind of, a lot of the times I see it as a disguise for bad behavior. So I can't really reply to emails. I'm a visionary. I can't go and fix something on a job site. I'm just so busy with my visions. It's like, all right, man, like you maybe should get medicated or something because you're freaking useless. Can we swear on this podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
You're fucking useless. So I think like the whole visionary bit has gotten a little out of hand, especially in this blue collar space, where it's like, I'm going to be honest, guys, it doesn't take that much vision to create a successful landscaping, construction, roofing, or painting business. The playbooks exist. You can have a vision for your life and you can have goals and strategy that you devise, but we're not like, this isn't rocket science. So I just think people need to calm down a little bit. Having said all that, where I think vision is incredibly important and why this is number 2 on the list is when I talk to high performers, one thing that they are able to describe with like stunning detail is the shape, size, look, feel, attitudes, behaviors, culture of the business that they want. and it's not vague. It's not blurry around the edges. It's like super, super high definition. In most cases, it's actually written down in a painted picture or a strategic plan or some tool that they've used. There are many. But when I am doing an assessment and I say, where do you want to be in 5 years? And one contractor A goes, let me tell you, and they start to tell me a story of all this stuff, and it might be super ambitious and wild. The level of detail they're able to speak to it with is like very highly correlated with the chances that they will get there, versus someone being like, we just want to grow, and we think this and we think that, we'd like to enter this vertical, we'd like to like expand a little bit, but they can't give you numbers, they can't give you deadlines, they can't give you much subtext beneath the header, if that makes sense. I generally speaking, those business owners end up really spinning their wheels and really not feeling that feeling of traction, as Gino talks about. So it's like the whole visionary label is maybe overused, but having a detailed vision in the first place is something that I see extremely consistently with the winners in this game.
Yeah. I've always thought of like the vision needs to be, it's a necessary function of your role as an owner most of the time. It's not like you're not the visionary. Like,
right.
As it just feels like that gets played out. I agree with that. I would just add to that too, something that like I really enjoy that, like you mentioned, there's lots of different frameworks for this. I like the painted picture model because it like, especially that framework, because it just lays out like, no, like give me specifics. Like, what does your sales and marketing team look like in 5 years? What does your production team look like? Like the specifics, the numbers behind it. Like, and then you can start to chunk that out into milestones of how you're going to get there. And that all ties back to that like time and priority management, right? Like that's how you should be evaluating your day, your week, your month, your quarter, in my opinion, is like, how many of these high level activities am I doing that drive me toward that, like that fixed end goal?
Yeah. There is a really great, I'll just do a quick plug for Cameron Harold, is a guy we've had on the podcast, and he's written a lot of books. The two that I know well are Vivid Vision, which talks about the painted picture. And if you're listening to this and you're kind of into this whole subject matter, that is a great book. It's like a 3-hour audio book, and it totally lays out how to do it. Basically, what you're wanting to do is write 6 to 8 pages of your desired business 3 years out in the first person and in the present tense, like as if you were literally walking around the building observing it. But he goes into way more depth. I would really, really recommend that book as a place to start if this is something you want to take seriously.
Awesome.
Keep moving?
Yeah, let's do it. What's number 3?
Okay, number 3, I'm reading off my notes here. They self-educate, but more importantly, they self-implement. So this modern era of, like, I call it the thoughtosphere, where everyone has a podcast. Look at us. Everyone has content. Everyone is now a content creator. Everyone's working on their personal brand. What is created, in my opinion, is a massive supply glut of like pretty good quality content. Like there's so much information available with a few clicks or a few scrolls on your phone. And I think that sometimes business owners get stuck on a bit of a carousel and they forget that you still have to actually do the thing. Like Joe Rogan is amazing, but Joe Rogan has made a lot of dumb people think they're smart because they're like in the know on subject matter and topics. And it's like you just listen to a podcast. This is a passive, you're consuming an entertainment product at the end of the day. I think the same thing happens in the entrepreneurship space. It's like knowing a lot about how to build a tech stack doesn't mean that you've built a tech stack. And knowing a lot about a sales process doesn't mean that you've implemented an effective one in your business. And so I think high performers do 2 things. One, they are in the know. They are consuming content. They're reading books. They're going to seminars. They're going to web classes when it's relevant to them. But they have a really disciplined sense of like when enough is enough on the information consumption front. And then they just turn the valve off and they go build it. And then when they're finished that, they go back for more information. But what they don't do is listen to content and convince themselves that that's adding value to their business. So it's like, I just think that can't be said enough. And people, it's a hard thing to discern when you're in the mix, because you're like, man, fuck, this idea is so good, I'm going to go do it. But before you go do it, you listen to the next episode or something else. And it's a very slippery slope to get on. So yes, educate yourself, but do something with the information in between. And if that means slowing down on the consumption, I think that's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think you watch all this stuff or read all these books, and it's like, I don't take very many notes, for example, when I read business books or podcasts or things like that, because the good shit sticks. Like the shit that is important to me today or in the next 6 months or a year for what we're working on sticks with me, and I'll be able to implement that or bring that to my team. I don't need to come back with a long list of buzzwords and videos to watch and all of these things. And I mean, there's so much. It's like a fire hose. Like you have to just pluck them out of there, pluck the gold nuggets out and put them to work. It's way more about getting started. Like just do the thing, like go do the thing. It's like, stop talking about it and get it done and try it out and break it. And,
I think an important, like a practical thing that I've done on this in the last couple of years is I try to like listen to my business or like listen to my team in terms of what it needs. And then I go and source the information based on that, rather than just listening to what an algorithm is feeding me or what's trending on Amazon or what some knob on stage told me I need to go read because this is the new book. Like, I'm just like, okay, like right now, this is an actual thing, like our actual content nurture, like we have pretty good top of funnel stuff, but the way that we actually take someone from like a passive prospect that's pretty cold to a warm lead that's ready to buy is kind of fucked. I know it is. The team knows it is. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to go find 2 or 3 books, pare it down to the one that looks best, read that, implement it, and then move on to the next thing. It's just like a more useful way to build your reading list than just what's trending right now.
Yeah,
sure.
I think you made a good point in there too when you said like pause, like absorb that material, pause, work on the thing. Like I've hit a point where, as much as I love consuming like your content, for example, Benji, I love Contractor Evolution. If I'm working on a particular thing, a particular project at this moment, I can't fucking listen to Contractor Evolution.
Totally.
I will go down like 50 different roads of like, oh, maybe I should be thinking about that or working on that. It's like, just focus and work on that one thing and then move on to the next thing.
Totally agree. Yeah. Okay, 4. They put a massive, high-performing contractors put a massive emphasis on employer brand and scalable hiring systems. This is not a new idea. It's become a bit of a cliche, especially in the trades, that it's hard to find good labor and the skilled trades and this and that. Like we're in a talent shortage, blah, blah, blah. We've all heard it. It's kind of a tired bit. I think I frame this idea a little bit differently, which is these businesses are all very human driven. And I know there's like robotic mowers and stuff in your guys' industry and like whatever, that's kind of hip and trending. But like for the foreseeable future, probably the biggest thing on your P&L is going to be salaries and wages. Like that's just a fundamental fact of these businesses. That's not true of every other industry. If you look at how other businesses are structured, they're not as human reliant, if that makes sense. They have more materials. I mean, even a restaurant is a good example. They still have a ton of labor, of course, but they're actually selling food that they buy and then they mark up and then they pass through. Like if you look at a law firm, they're leverage their relationships. They're using software in a really interesting way. If you look at professional services, those are way less human reliant. So there's like, my point is, if this is the fundamental nature of your business, which it is, it's really unacceptable and kind of stupid to just be bad at this, because it's just such a core, it's such a core part of your business.
It is your product.
It's lit, like you are literally selling well organized labor that is able to produce an outcome or an output for customers. And yeah, sometimes there's some design involved or there's some materials involved, but like it's just such a fundamental part of what you do. Your ability to attract and hire people is so much more important than your ability to do the actual trade or the craft that you do. And so when I say, just to finish my thought here, like when I look at the businesses that are really crushing it, their employer brand, and by employer brand, I mean how they branded their place of work to the job market, through their web design, through their socials, through landing pages, through something as simple as their company swag, benefits, time off, all that stuff. They've done a A+ job of that in their market, and they enjoy the A team. Like when people wonder where are all the good tradespeople, they're working at that fucking business.
Yes,
not yours. Like so, that's how this works. The talent market functions like any other market. There are supply forces, there are demand forces. And I'm not saying that this is an easy problem to solve, but it is a relatively simple one.
Yeah, just put in a bit of effort. Like if you are in your trade, like in landscaping in Calgary, we call it a destination company. Like we want to be the go-to company for landscapers in our city, right? And it's pay, it's all types of compensation, but it's also like when you're sitting in an interview, I'm the visionary at Landscapers by Nature. What is your story? What is your vision? Like, what's this thing going to be? Right. And that's what it's all about. Like, why would someone want to work for you? Like, that's what it comes down to. Why would they possibly want to work for you? There's bigger companies than you probably in your market. Why would someone want to work for you and not them? And it doesn't always come down to money. A lot of it comes down to like, are these people cool? Like, are they people I'd want to work with? Does the owner have a good vision? And one of the other things too, like there's a lot of business is processes and systems and having all these great things in place. And we talked about working on those earlier, but having intelligent people that are bought into your vision and working with you crutches that up a lot. Just having smart people that want to kick ass and help you build a high performing team, then they just want to kick ass every day. Like it's worth the time to interview 10 people to find one crew leader or whatever it is, right? So
it's that old saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I just think it's such a great soundbite.
Totally.
Number 5, they are not in a rush. High performers are not in a rush. Do you guys ever go to like conferences or trade shows or like, business, like networking events of some form, whether locally or you fly to the event or whatever, and you like meet these, like you meet a young guy and you can tell he's like on the entrepreneurial Kool-Aid and he's like listening to a ton of Grant Cardone and he's like, I just started my business, but I'm going to do $10 million next year. And you're like, and you guys have been in the trade for like, both of you have been running your businesses for 10 years or more.
Yeah.
You're like, this guy's an idiot. Like, what are we talking about? Like okay. Yes, there is conceivably a pathway to doing what you're saying. This like moonshot, super fast growth. Yeah, you could run ads aggressively. You could hire super aggressive one call close salespeople. There is a way to do that. What I'm saying is, from my vantage point through Breakthrough Academy and the assessments I've done and the people we've had come through the program, the 200 plus now entrepreneurs and experts I've interviewed on the show, but like these sort of like overnight sensations almost every single time have a major regression, meaning they did get to 7 million, but then the next year they did 2 and lost $58,000 a month. that, or they just go bankrupt. So like, yeah, you can do it, but you're not, it's just a totally unsustainable approach. And what I've noticed about the people that are really, really on their game is that they're not in a rush. Like they're totally good with, look, if you could invest your stocks and get 30% growth year over year, you would be beyond the best investor in the world. And why we treat our small businesses differently, where it's like, if we're not 2Xing every year or 3Xing every year for 5 years in a row, we're a loser. I just don't think that is, this isn't about like, you're not ambitious enough. It's just like, do the math. Like if you're growing 30% every year in 5 years, you've got a really stable, really well-built, well-rounded business that you've been involved with. You haven't involved a bunch of leverage or debt. You haven't burned through a bunch of people because you did it in a really disorganized way. You haven't tarnished your reputation. So good things take time. And what I've noticed about the real high performers is they're not in this crazy false urgency state that you see with a lot of younger business owners.
Yeah, good one.
That one, I'm not going to lie, that one felt like a personal attack, thinking on me like a few years back. That was 100%. Yeah, exactly.
What were you trying to do, Jason?
My thing was, well, I'm the visionary at ACA.
Does it say it on your business card? That's the important question.
No, but that was that was my problem. Is I was just like uber focused on getting to that end goal, and I was driving at that without like the business fundamentals, like building the foundation to get to the next step, It was just like, no, we're going there and we're going to get there as fast as we can possibly go. It wasn't even necessarily about revenue growth necessarily for us. That was part of it for sure. It was more like, this is what I want the company to be, and it's going to get there a year from now, which just is not realistic. And it put us in some bad spots. Like it caused some problems at our company, and we basically had to kind of revamp and start rebuilding. We had to regress. We had to go back, and we had to say we gotta rethink this. This isn't gonna work.
Yeah, I don't know who came up with this saying, but I love it, which is revenue hides a lot of problems, and I really strongly believe that. And then the other one is just people overestimate what they can do in a year, but they underestimate what they can do in a decade. And I think that if you're serious about your business, this is not a 3-year play, right? You're not a day trader. You have chosen this path for a reason. You felt it was the most compelling option for the future you want to have. So be in it for the long haul. And that means like being a touch more conservative and maybe doing a little bit less Grant Cardone hype stuff, in my opinion. What number are we on? That was 5.
6.
For 6?
Yep.
Okay, this is kind of a quick one, but I would say that the high-performing contractors that I work with are very tech-savvy without falling into shiny object syndrome. So they embrace software. They have a great CRM to manage their business. They have project management tools. They're using QuickBooks or whatever accounting software they like very effectively. They're using a time tracking app. They have found software-based solutions for the things that their business actually needs software for, but not gone, and this can happen very quickly, not gotten into just sort of like adding systems for the sake of it, which we see a lot of too, where it's like, hey man, you should probably pick up the phone and call some customers back because your sales are dipping. I don't know why we're looking at a second, a second CRM. We just installed the last one. Why are we doing a demo with Monday.com when you're already using Asana? By the way, your business doesn't even do any hardcore project management, so this is a colossal waste of time in the first place. It's pretty easy to think that looking at software tools is actual work, and it's not.
That's a direct.
I don't know if you guys have fallen into that trap before, but I see it a lot.
Oh, Jason, for sure. Yeah, big time. No, me too, a little bit. No, I think what it is like, what's the business problem I'm trying to solve today? Like, is my utilization is shit. What tools could help me with that? there's real world options and there's software options. What's time tracking or whatever's going to fix it, rather than trying to, you mow like a few hundred lawns a week and you're trying to implement this $2,000 a month software to get you ready for something that you're going to grow into probably 3 years from now. It's like just, you don't have to prepare yourself that much. Just go get it done.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I actually think it's my philosophy on this is like when the system that you're using or the tool that you're using is literally bursting at the fucking seams, then you go find this. I don't philosophically, I don't really buy that whole, like, we're going to like overspend on this because we're going to grow into it. I see, like, sometimes people do that with real estate. They're like, I'm going to buy a huge shop because we're going to grow into it. I'm like, I don't know, man. That's a lot of overhead. Like, I don't know. Maybe some people disagree with me. I've never really gotten that whole approach to business building. I think like when you're ready, your systems are going to tell you because they're going to be broken. We're ready for a new website at Breakthrough Academy because our WordPress is literally just like falling apart at the seams. So like we know that it's time to do that. But I wouldn't preemptively have done that 5 years ago because I just think it's kind of a waste of time. So tech savvy, but not into shiny object syndrome. Number 7, high-performing entrepreneurs believe in and invest in brand. So this is another like tricky one. Look, there are a lot of really expensive brand consultants who are very expensive and they wear nice clothing and they wear cool hipster glasses and they're going to talk about the emotional connection your customers need to have and brand messaging and tone of voice and all that stuff. I live in the brand space, so I do see value in some of that for businesses of a certain size. But for most companies under $10 million a year, it's not a super, super complex exercise. When I say they believe in and invest in brand, what I'm saying is there are certain brand assets like a website, like a good social media, like a great logo and brand package, vehicle wraps, really good quality print materials. If you're doing trade shows, a trade show booth, if you're doing any sort of like door-to-door canvassing or marketing, like good materials for that. Those are, so what I'm saying is like those kind of more practical, tangible, easy to get your head around type items, I think, in my opinion, are dollars well spent for most of the businesses listening to this. And the pushback that I see a lot is basically, well, we worked with a brand guy one time and they got us some crappy logo and they built us a shitty website. And so that's really stupid. And they kind of write off the whole exercise. Some people might say, well, I do more commercial work and I work with general contractors. I'm very B2B, so brand doesn't really matter that much. I still kind of call BS on that. I think that there are many, many businesses that are just like, it's like PQR siding or ABC roofing. They've got these very boring names that are usually the initials of the owner or one of their kids. And they just like haven't evolved it to be anything more modern or sophisticated or progressive than that. Becoming a household name in your local market is inevitably the goal for most of you listening. So make it a name that they can remember, pick colors that they're going to like. You can work with some incredibly good people on Fiverr or any of these sort of gig economy marketplaces to get pretty good quality graphic design and brochures made. And to be honest, it's kind of fun. I like that kind of work. A lot of people really enjoy. So I think investing in brand is something I see a lot of high performers do. And it's not something that's going to get you a lead tomorrow, but it will get you 100 in 5 years. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's a long-term investment.
Yeah. I think that's a key thing to remember that I hear as an objection a lot of the time. Like this is something that came up in our Facebook group recently where people were talking about brand building, logos on the trucks, uniforms. I think it was logos on trucks and uniforms. And they're like, well, I can't point to any leads that I've got from the trucks or the uniforms. And like, first of all, it's like, that's not what this is. This is brand building. Like first of all, you could point to them. Like
Yeah,
there's
that's just bad
definitely
tracking. Like you just don't have good. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's just important to remember. Like especially that's low hanging fruit. Your truck's parked in front of these properties every single day. Like that's low hanging fruit. It's a billboard.
You guys have both done really good jobs with your brands. I haven't seen your stuff in a while, Brennan. Well, okay, then I'll take you off. Jason's done a really good job with his branding.
Jason's good at
Jason
that.
is good. His swag is sick. His gear is sick. Everything is just done a really nice job. Go check out A Cut Above Landscaping in Denver if you want an example of what good looks like.
Thank you.
If you want your grass cut well, LBN in Calgary.
Yeah. That's funny. Okay, number 8. Most of them are high-performing contractors. Most of them are into mindset work or personal development in some way, shape, or form. This can get pretty woo-woo pretty quickly. You guys know me. I am not a fan of the 4-hour morning ritual. I'm really not. Where you wake up and you worship the sun gods and you do your cold plunge and you get grounded and drink your matcha, and then you do your gratitudes, and then finally around 10 a.m. you crack open your laptop and maybe do a little worky. No, I'm not like, that's not what I'm talking about. But what I am saying is, like, by the way, when I say like mindset work, I'm talking about visualization, affirmations, doing painted pictures, prayer, if you're into that kind of thing. Anything that really helps you get your head right. And when I say personal development, I'm talking about like consuming books and podcasts where the messaging is like, let's be honest, it's kind of just like motivational. And sometimes it's kind of cringe and it's kind of cheesy. And so we turn our nose up and go, I don't need that. This is so lame. I have seen with the high performers, they understand that having good thoughts gives you good feelings, and good feelings gives you good actions, and good actions give you good outcomes. So they're doing this woo-woo stuff, not because they want to make their heart center chakra feel better. They're doing it because they connect that with an outcome that they want. And I think for me, that's been really helpful, because I was always like, I'm not going to listen to Ed Milet. This guy's kind of a lame-o. And then listen, as life and business get harder and the stakes and the responsibilities go up and up and everything just gets more difficult and complex, I'll be the first to admit, like, I'm actually good with a little bit of positive messaging in my ears. Like, I actually need a little bit of like motivational help, spiritual help. Like, this shit is hard. And I don't think that you're proving anything about like how macho you are or how strong you are by like being successful without that stuff. If it helps you use it, it does for me. And clearly, because I'm saying this as an observation, it helps a lot of entrepreneurs that we work with. I noticed that like 8 out of 10 contractors at the top of the game are doing some podcast or some book or going to some seminar that just helps them get their mind right.
Yeah. Just when it's an excuse or a procrastination for us visionary types, that's when it really,
or when you think it's like going to be the thing that actually gets the work done. Like, that's the thing. I think it's too often it's like, well, if I drink my matcha tea in the morning, then I'll make $1 million next year. It's like, well, that's not the way it fucking works. But I also think that I've struggled with the same thing with a lot of this stuff, because it's like, there are things that I find helpful that would be considered pretty woo-woo. Like, I will wake up and meditate in the morning. I do that every morning.
So do I. Yeah.
And it's like, it's almost like something I don't, it's almost like something I don't want to talk about sometimes, just because I'm like, no, that's like, it's not like that's magically helping me. What it's doing is it's allowing me some time in the morning before I just get bombarded. With shit all day long, to just like forget about it, clear my head, and come in with a fresh like perspective, like just without any sort of like anything kind of like painting my overall like attitude for the day. Like, just come in fresh with a fresh start. That's all it is.
Like, any of those things can be very valuable.
Right.
It's just they're not the thing. Like, the more you do with them is not the thing that's going to lead to being successful. Right.
Yeah, and of course, the other thing that is off-putting for a lot of like actual high performers is that 70% of the people in the audience are bona fide card carrying losers. And so you're kind of like, okay, I might like the messaging is good, but like this crowd is really weird. Like this group, this audience is like not, most of these people are like clearly jobless. Some of them might be homeless. I might be at the wrong conference. So it's like, that can be off-putting too. I'm saying the actual messaging or the mental frameworks or that mindset work, if you can just weave it into your system, can be hugely beneficial. And it has been for me. And I see it with a lot of other high performers. Okay. Number 9, they identify as entrepreneurs more than they do as tradespeople. So this is not a really complex point, but there's a difference in the way that a carpenter who decided to start a business walks and carries and acts and thinks than someone who is like an entrepreneur who happens to do carpentry work, who happens to build homes. It's a very different orientation to the business. One is like, and by the way, there's like, I don't want to, it sounds like I'm being elitist or this is like a pejorative on like the crafts. Like, I think that there's absolutely a market and demand for that type of business and that type of contributor to society as well. They just generally don't scale. It's just, it's usually going to be, you know, that crafts person, that trades person, and a helper max. And it's all word of mouth, and they go from job to job, and it's referral, and they support their family, and they build or make really cool shit. But it's not, it's not going to be a 7-figure business. It's certainly not going to be an 8-figure business. They're probably not going to exit for a high multiple. It's just a thing that they do, and they happen to a business, and that's great. The ones that are the business owners that are absolutely annihilating it, like really truly look at their business and the widget that it produces. I mean, you guys do landscape maintenance, so maintaining landscapes is the widget, right? I don't think that either of you are like passionate about how you guys mow lawns or how you, do like edge a garden or do softscape or whatever, but you are passionate about building a business that does that at scale. That part of it is really, really fun. And I think like Elon Musk has this thing that he says a lot. He's like, when he talks about the Model 3, I've heard him do this bit many times. He's like, designing a car is very, very easy. Like, I really can't say that enough. The really hard part is designing the factory that builds the car. Like, that's where the work is. He's like, Model 3 is like a few drawings, a few mock-ups. It's like 4 smart people. It took us like 2 weeks, like super easy. It took me years. I almost exploded my brain to build the Gigafactory, to build that car. And I just think that says a lot about his orientation of things. And I think there's something we can learn from it, which is like, the high performers look at the widget that their business makes just as purely output. And they don't really care if it's a Model 3 or if it's a mowed lawn or if it's a custom home or if it's installing Christmas lights or if it's whatever. But they put a lot of focus on the factory that makes it. And they love that. They love trying to solve that problem. So I just think that's a really good framing. If you're too obsessed, and I think the part that people get caught in is they want to do both. They're like, I want to be like the craftsman who like meets every customer and shakes every hand and is like really hands-on, but I also want to do $10 million a year. You do have to pick a lane, and there's going to be pros and cons and sacrifices you have to make on either. But if you want to go big, you want to have a really high performing business, you can't meet every customer. You can't hammer every nail. You can't clean up the job sites. You can't write every thank you card. You're going to be building systems and hiring people to do all that. And you need to get your juice from now filling that role, being kind of the architect of the thing rather than the doer of the thing. So yeah. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I think that's an important distinction.
I'd just say that I think it's so common in our industry because there's so many people that came from the field. Like both Brandon and I came from the field as employees and then eventually like started a business. Our whole first episode was kind of about our origin stories. And I think both of us made the same point where it's like, I don't really frankly give a shit about like cutting grass. Like it's not something I'm super passionate about. I don't wake up in the morning I'm like, man, I can't wait to cut some grass today. But I'm like really interested in how to build a business, to your point. And I think Yeah, because there's so many of us in our industry that come from the field, it's very easy to get caught up in the thing itself. Like, I'm going to build this thing, I'm going to do that really, really well. Not to say you shouldn't do that. Like, you should do the thing well. But like, I think you're right. The people who I've chatted with who like really excel and really build something that scales, have that entrepreneurial focus. Like, that's what they're focused on. Like, how do I build the factory? I love that. I hadn't heard that Elon Musk bit. So
I've said this on my podcast a bunch of times, and I'm worried that I just sound like an Elon fanboy. I'm really not. But I'm telling you, the new Walter Isaacson biography of Elon Musk is incredible. It's just it reads like a novel. It's literally a page turner. I couldn't put it down. I thought it was unbelievable. It's more of a comment on Walter Isaacson as a writer than it is on Elon, who I get is polarizing and maybe not everyone's cup of tea, but it's just such a great book. And there's so many kind of lessons like that. I do want to make another comment here that's sort of connected to this idea. While I'm saying they identify as entrepreneurs but not as tradespeople, most of the business owners that are really killing it are pretty highly technical at the craft that they do. So they've evolved out. They've evolved out to now work on the business that does the craft. I've never seen someone who wasn't a great roofer first. I shouldn't say never. I rarely see people who are just like, I'm so good at the business stuff and I'm so good at the leadership stuff and the strategy stuff that I don't need to know anything about the inner workings of my business. I don't see that work very often.
Unless it's a partnership.
All the time. I see it talked about and celebrated like I'm just such a great investor that I'm good at the business stuff. And it's almost like a point of, it's almost a point of pride. Like, I don't know how to like actually do the thing, but I'm like so good at this other stuff and my business does X. I've met a few of those guys, but like outside of the occasional, like really sophisticated private equity group or some investor groups, like most people like that are just dumbasses. And they've read too many, books and think that they're smarter than they are. And it usually flops. So they actually do know the thing really well.
And I mean, when your biggest cost by far is labor, and doing well in this business comes down to labor efficiency. Like, how are you going to come up with these ideas and sell them to your team unless you've been there, right?
Completely.
There's it's like the guy that is a carpenter and gets to a place where he has a helper and does really well and does awesome finished carpentry and does that for his whole life and is happy and provides for his family is awesome. Like, that's fantastic. And if that individual is really happy with that, then great. But the people that build huge companies that we're talking about here, they evolve along the way. They may start that way and it may take however long it takes. It could take 1 year, it could take 10, but eventually they evolve into learning how to hire and attract great people to their company and building it into a business. And then they're machines, right? Like, because everything that the laborers and techs have to do, how to talk to those people and attract them to your business.
Yeah.
But you're also learning financials and marketing and all of the other things that are required to kick ass at a high perform, like in a big business.
100%. I just think, I think it's an important point because in this sort of, again, modern thoughtosphere where everything is made to sound so simple and easy, people think that they can skip learning the craft. You can't. You want to run a small business, you are going to need to coach your techs on how to be more efficient. If you've never done the thing yourself, you're fucked. And by the way, the credibility you're going to lose so fast. Like, do you think that anyone cares how good you are at other stuff if you look like a total moron on site? Like, see you later. They're going to go work for some other guy next week. So I think it needs to be said that even though they're high performers and they're maybe off the tools, they could put the tools on and absolutely destroy you if they had to. So want to get that out of the way. Okay, number 10, let's keep moving. They've developed an ability to focus. What do I want to say here? I think that we live in very distracted times. I don't think that algorithms are a good thing for humanity. I don't think that smartphones are, well, they have some real utility for sure, but we are just now learning the true cost of these things on our brains, on our mental health, on our ability to focus, XYZ. There's a really great book that just came out called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It's all about the impact of smartphones on young people. But it parlays into this point I'm trying to make, which is I see a lot of people in trades in the sample size that I work with sort of joke about like their inability to focus. This is, I have ADD, or I have this, or I have this other thing. 70% of the time it's never been diagnosed. It's not like I'm like, do you? Or you just, do you just think you do?
Yeah.
Are you on meds? Well, no, but I'm pretty sure I have it. Okay. Like and again, this is maybe not going to be the most popular take, but I don't think that that's something to just kind of like throw out there and be like, well, I'm like easily distracted. But I'm a good ideas guy. And I've got these great people who like take my great ideas and do all the work. I don't think that's a good place to be. And I don't see people make it that long in business with that. Now, we are all distracted, and we are all we're all learning how to deal with screens and notifications popping up, blah, blah, blah. But one thing that I have noticed about high performers, whether it's through meditation, sound canceling headphones, do not disturb mode, locking the office door, getting a more comfortable chair, getting a humidifier for their office so they kind of have the lighting and the vibes right that they like. I don't know what they do, but they find a way to block out distractions and move shit forward. There is the occasional like ADHD savant who you will meet. You do see them. I've met a few of them, but there's way more of those guys, and men and women, who are stuck doing, like, still stuck on the job site, still with a business they have grown to hate, unfortunately. And it's because they literally haven't learned the discipline to sit down and move stuff forward. So there's a really careful point, because I don't want to be like canceled by the neurodivergent community. If you actually have ADHD or ADD or dyslexia, or pick your 3-letter, 4-letter thing, I have a ton of empathy for you. You should actually work with a professional to get that actually diagnosed and actually use tools and methodologies to fix that. What I'm commenting on is the languaging we use around it to normalize just having a chimpanzee brain. I don't think that's a good thing. You will not get critical work finished if you do everything to a state of 40% and then move on to the next thing. So I've noticed that the high performers, they can, when they have to, lock in and fucking get something finished to a state of completion and like quite good. And then they move on to the next thing. And then, maybe they check their phone in the middle. But if they just can't do that, I'm telling you, it's a struggle. And I have conversations with people about this all the time. We're like, this is like, literally, I'm 45. I have 3 kids and a big business. And I literally can't write an email without checking my phone 3 times in the middle. And they're not saying, it's not a joke. They're like, I actually need help. This is a problem. So high performers have found a way using tools that are available to focus. And I just think that needs to be said.
I have actual diagnosed ADD from when I was a little kid. And I think that it's something, when people just say like, I'm OCD, like, oh, I'm OCD about this. Like, you're not actually OCD. Like, people say that shit all the time, right?
Right.
And like in the start of my business, it was a real problem, but it's something I struggled with all through school. Like, I didn't finish high school, and that's like, it's very hard to decipher even for myself if that was due to laziness and effort and not interest, or because I have ADD. I don't know, right. And when people talk about it, they say they have ADD or whatever. It's like, I don't know if you actually do. At the start of my business, when I couldn't afford any good managers or people to hire to take care of some of my weaknesses, it was a real struggle. Like, the 0 to $1 million was like impossibly difficult. It was like tears from stress, and it was really, really hard to get through and focus on the right things and put the work in. But maybe people have way worse cases. I think I'm pretty extreme on it, but I've found strategies. I've had it all my life. I didn't develop it in my 30s or something. And I can get hyper focused on things I'm interested in. It's usually about 3 hours before the deadline, but I can really kick ass at things. And so the story here is that, yes, you have to find a way to focus, whether it's like hiring people for your weaknesses because you can't do it, or, to take care of your disabilities.
100%.
If I had no arms, I'd have to hire people to trim the lawns for me, right?
That sounds like a ridiculous thing you're saying, but that's exactly my point. That's actually a really useful comparison.
It's just not it's not an excuse. Like, I don't even like talking about it. It's not a weakness. It's just there's shit you guys have as well that sucks, and you have to hire other people to take care of. I feel the same way about myself, and more people blame it on lazy. Use it as an excuse for laziness, or it's just procrastination that everyone has than anything.
That's kind of what I'm hinting at. I'm saying
totally.
It's not. I'm not. This isn't a judgment at all. Like, if you genuinely have one of these things, I'm like, okay, that's a nameable thing. We have the science to diagnose this. We can fix it. All I'm commenting on is like, don't normalize it so much to yourself, because we've become so accepting of every single mindset and body type and health affliction and everything in the world. I'm like, it's just not a good place to be. This is something you definitely want to address and fix. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken, but don't like make that the norm, because that's more comfortable than actually addressing it. So I just think that's a really important point. And I for whatever reason, this whole thing really crops up in trades and blue collar businesses the most. I see it a lot. Keep moving.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I've got a couple bangers to close here. Number 11, and I should have made this number 1 because I think it's my favorite one. High-performing contractors are super involved in their businesses. So you guys have heard me go on this rant before, but I have a hot take, which is I literally think that Tim Ferriss in the 4-hour work week did almost irreversible damage to the entrepreneurial mindset in North America over the last 15 years. It came out at the perfect time. His podcast was huge. I actually love his podcast. I really like Tim Ferriss. That whole notion, and the notion I'm alluding to, just to be explicit, is sort of this idea that you're going to systemize things so well, and you're going to hire people so well that you're going to run your business in 4 hours a week, and you can do it remotely from Thailand over a laptop. It's not reality. It's not the sample size that I have. You can absolutely build a business where you can create freedom for yourself. You can build a business where you can create a role that you prefer more than some of the other roles. You can create a business where you can take long seasonal breaks. Maybe you take a month off in the summer and a month off in the winter. But this idea that you can turn a blue collar business, especially as the founder of that business, and if you came up with the thing and built it from day one, the idea that you can turn that into what is essentially a passive cash flowing asset, I've not seen done successfully in my sample size. I just haven't. So I think that there are some really silly ideas around what's possible. Well, I'm just going to get virtual assistants and I'm going to get so good at delegation that everyone's going to do everything. No. People want it. That's not going to happen. At least I haven't seen it happen. So the high performers that I see, they've got a job. They've designed a job for themselves that they love. They have a lifestyle that they love. They've surrounded themselves with the team that they adore, and they work less than they did when they started it. Those things are all true, but they absolutely fucking know how many sales they did this week. They know how many leads came in this week. They know who is improving in their role and who's really on the down. They are involved in their businesses, even at the highest levels. So I just think that's sometimes people maybe delude themselves around how disconnected they can be from their business one day and still reap all the rewards. That's not something I've seen.
I can think of a few people I've met in BTA who definitely like spend less time on their business than they did at one point. And even to a point where like a lot of other people look up to them and are like, man, I want to get to that point. Like they're only working say 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week or whatever it is. But also what I would tell you about those people from experience, meeting them and talking to them and chatting with them and seeing how they run their businesses, those 20 or 30 hours that they do work, they fucking crush. Like they work their ass off, and they're super good at their trade. They understand the business. They're highly effective in that time that they're spending. They're not distracted, kind of like a wrap up of all the things we talked about. Like they demonstrate all these qualities. And so the time that they're putting in is incredibly well spent. And then, yeah, they can afford to only work 20 hours a week. They can sometimes even less. But it's not that like sitting on a beach in Thailand and, just fucking off for forever.
No,
I love that shit. I love that book. It's something that got me into entrepreneurship and convinced me to get into business. What I think it doesn't do well at is it probably helps people take the jump and start their business. What it doesn't do very good at is how hard it's going to be to get there. Right. Like it's been 10 and a half years running LBN, working insane hours and, throwing up from stress every once in a while, just, healthy little throw up and get back at her kind of thing, until there was any enjoyment until year 8. And I think that's it's kind of like the entrepreneurial thing is like, how hard could it be? How hard could it be for to send people to Mars or build cars or whatever the fuck, you kind of have to have a little bit of that. And there is a lot of that kind of talk in the 4-hour work week. And it does enlighten, like what it did for me anyway, from my experiences, it confirmed thoughts I had as a young person as to there's clearly an alternative to the normal career that all my friends are going into, but it made it seem easier than it actually is.
Yeah.
I work more than 4 hours a week still. I don't think the book title is literal. It's maybe for some people it is, but you know what I'm saying?
I think it's also important to remember that that you brought this up, I think, in one of our first podcasts ever, Brandon, you mentioned the 4-hour work week, and you're like, really should have started a business that makes a product. That's more what Tim preaches. And we're talking about the trades industry, right?
Some Amazon shit or sell some shit online. I don't know. I don't know anything about that, but
right.
Yeah.
So keep in mind the industry that we're in, and I think be realistic about that. It's not to say you can't make a really good life for yourself. I know I've seen a lot of people do it and do it really well and work less than they did ever before, but it's a grind.
Yeah. I think having a systems mindset, trying to automate stuff wherever you can, trying to delegate wherever you can, create leverage. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do. I just think that people have gotten a little carried away with sort of what's possible where in this industry. And Jason, there are a ton of Breakthrough Academy members who are I've got a really nice little thing going for 20 hours a week or less. But I'll tell you what, the second that their senior sales manager leaves and this happens, they are back to 60 hours a week until that, they are at the drop of a hat back in the mix to solve the problem. And then maybe they get back to a place where it's more on the maintenance program and they can chill a little more. So it just, they're still involved. They're still connected. Number 12, they have built high-performing contractors have built an extremely strong implementation muscle. This is something you guys both know a lot about, something that we do a lot at Breakthrough Academy. And when I say implementation muscle, what I mean is this. When you are running a business, you have to do two things simultaneously. You have to look after the basic scorecard stats. You have to get leads. You have to book appointments. You have to sell those appointments or estimates into booked jobs. You build a schedule. You have to produce the work. You have to collect. There's your basic operational functions of a business that need to happen. And those need to happen. If they don't, you're going to zero. Game's over. But while that's happening, you also need to play a second game, which is you need to build the business that does those operational things for you. You need to build the gigafactory that makes the car. Most contractors are incredibly good at that first category because they're action-oriented, they're doers, they're problem solvers. They're generally pretty persuasive. They can sweet talk customers. They can convince an employee to work a little harder. Like, they're good at that stuff. Where they're weak is on the implementation muscle, which really has to do with complex problem solving, project managing, needs analysis, like understanding what the business needs in terms of systems in the first place. A lot of the times it requires a certain level of like tech savviness or software literacy. So the contractors and business owners that are at the top of their game have developed that muscle either internally, or if they are truly so visionary that they can't do any of it themselves, they have built teams or small groups within their company that can do it. The absolute upper threshold for that kind of like, I kind of call him the frustrated hustler, which is like, I work my ass off, my business should be bigger. But it's like, we haven't implemented any systems, dude. Like, you still collect money with checks. You still send out your schedule via text to your crews the night before. You don't have a website. You don't have anything. Like, there's nothing here infrastructurally to make the business bigger than it is. They're sort of like the upper threshold for a business like that is like $1 million a year, maybe $1.5 million if you have a really large average job size. For you guys, it would be even smaller because you're doing fairly small ticket stuff. So anyway, implementation muscle is something that high performers build. And, you know, both of you guys have been really exceptional at that, or you found ways in your businesses to be exceptional at it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that one's huge. And I think a key thing there that at least I've found helpful is like, kind of like when we were talking about the trade, right? Like, you were really good at the trade, and then you got into like the business side of it, like building the factory. And now you can like help guide the people that are part of that factory and build the systems that are part of it. It's the same thing with implementation. Like, don't just, in my opinion, I've seen a lot of people who are like, well, I'll just hire that out. Like, I'll bring someone in who's going to implement for me constantly. And it's like, I don't think that works, or at least I should say I haven't seen that work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't. I've thought about that a lot, Jason. It doesn't work, but I'm still curious as to why that is. Like, why doesn't it work? Why can't you just hire someone that's really good with systems and why can't you hire an MBA to come in and systemize your business for you?
I think it's this, I don't know, I'm hypothesizing here, but I think it's the same problem we talked about before, where it's like, they don't understand the trade the way that you do. Like, and it's just, there's that like game of telephone between the two, where it's like, I know when I look at a problem, a complex problem, like I can work backwards into the solution because I have the like boots on the ground experience. Right. I think it's similar to like the MBA coming in and saying he's going to just buy a landscape business and he's going to grow it. Like, yeah, so there's some cases where that's worked. But more often than not, I think it's just like that lack of understanding of what's happening out there. So how are you going to solve that problem? How are you going to come up with a solution that actually works? Now, what I have seen work and what I've tried to implement in my business, and I think we do pretty well at it, is like, I first focused on getting really good at implementation, and I leaned on other people who were really good at it to learn from. Brandon was one of them. You, Benji, like everyone in the BTA community is kind of where I picked that up. For me personally, it was valuable. But then I could start to build a team around it. Because then I was like, I kind of had a system for building systems. Like, okay, here's what we're going to do first. We're going to like only talk about the problem. I don't want to talk about any possible solutions. I want to make sure that we're focused on the right problem. Then we'll move on to talking about potential solutions. And then we'll probably like test a couple of them on a small scale before we decide which one's going to be the actual thing that we're going to invest money and time and effort in. And then we'll move forward on developing that out. We'll assign roles, we'll assign responsibilities and deadlines, and we'll actually manage this just like we would a project in the field. And we'll move forward from there. So like that to me like made sense. I had to learn it first. It's the same thing I did with the landscaping side of it. I had to learn how to mow the yards. Then I could kind of understand how to build the factory. And I think it's the same thing with implementation, or at least that was my experience.
There's another way to kind of like frame this, which is, we're very blessed at BT to have really close relationships with a lot of these software providers. We know the team at Buildertrend really well. I mean, LMN is maybe a better example for this industry. I talk to Mark Bradley a few times a year. Great guy. I really, really like Mark Bradley. I love LMN and what he's done with his businesses. I really admire the guy. But I talked to him about this exact thing. I go, what percentage of your users are using LMN to its fullest degree? He'd be like 2%. And say, what do you think the average, how deeply has the average contractor, landscaper implemented LMN? He's like, they're using, I don't know, 25% of the platform. They like this feature and this feature, like all this other stuff that they just have. Not only have they not implemented it, they don't even know it exists. Right. So if you talk to like customer support teams of these software businesses, they can like describe it from the other perspective, which is like people pay for things and invest in systems that they want to implement, they understand work, and then they just kind of fall to the wayside because they get busy and this is good enough, and they kind of just pay for stuff that they don't really need every month. And so it's another interesting way to like look at it. This whole implementation muscle, seeing a project through to completion, not just finding the problem, not just building the solution for the problem, but then also the hard part, as you guys know, is like fostering adoption, selling the team on using the new solution to solve the problem. You could come out with your little whiteboard or your spreadsheet on Huddle and and I'm sure you both have, guys, I made this great system. They're like, who fucking cares? Like, I'm going to go to thanks, Brandon. Awesome. Thanks for telling me how to do my job. See you later. And you're like, you just feel like the biggest idiot in the world. So it's like, I'm saying, build an implementation muscle and make it sound so easy. This is a hard thing to learn. It's not easy at all. But if you want to build a business that scales, the deeper you get into it, the more of your focus is spent on this implementation side and the less of it on that kind of the scorecard stats, the lead gen, the selling, the production.
Totally. Yeah. The hard part is making it the norm in your business, right?
Yeah.
It's rarely the project I've found over the last 10 or 11 years. It's like, you think implementing LMN is hard and setting up LMN is hard. That's the fun part. Like now getting a bunch of guys that have been punching cards in the morning, for time tracking, to now do it on an app on their phone or tablet. That's the hard part, and holding the line on those things.
What have you found effective to make that, like to really see the project through, to use the LMN example, the time tracking example, like what have you, from a leadership perspective, from a persuasion perspective, like what do you actually do to get people to do what you ask them to?
So from a persuasion perspective, it's explaining why, like not just telling people like, hey, we are tracking our time now, Big Brother's watching. Like that's what people think, right? Like I've been in the field. I don't want friggin' dash cams that face in at me and all this shit either. It's just, if it comes with an explanation as to why and how this will actually affect the business, and it's genuine, because that's what it is. It's like, we genuinely want to understand in this example, where all of our time is going. We want to get better at estimating. We want to be able to, just track everything better. Not track, we want to track you, but it's because of this. This is why. And you get buy-in that way. And I think that's one side of it. And the other side of it is like, you just have to have balls of steel, kind of like you have to hold the line on it. Like it will just drift back to whatever it was before if you don't, hold people accountable to it and just say like, hey, you didn't do your timesheets right. Come in on Sunday at 6 a.m. and we'll work on it together if you don't get it right, this week or whatever the case may be. But people just tend to, I think, like Benji, you've seen more than anybody, these things die on the vine, like all these initiatives, and people will work all winter on some huge thing and then it just dies on the vine in spring. And I saw an awesome short from Simon Sinek today, and it was like, if you had to teach a monkey to climb on a 10-foot pedestal and recite Shakespeare, most people would start by building the pedestal, when obviously teaching the monkey is the hard part. That you should like, that's the tough part, like, you know. But most people would build the pedestal and be like, hey guys, I'm half done the project, you know, like, look at me.
That's a really funny visual.
Yeah. Anyway.
It's like when you do a marathon. I've done a couple marathons, albeit extremely slowly. They say when you hit 32 kilometers, you're halfway done, and a full marathon's 42. So it's just like
right.
it is a matter of perspective. The back half is often the harder part. I think the explaining why thing is really helpful, and I think you guys ever met this guy that I've had on the pod a couple times, Tom Hughes, the Gemba Docs guy, or seen any of his stuff?
I've seen some of his stuff. I haven't met him.
He's awesome. He's Irish. It's an SOP building software that I can't recommend enough. It's really cool. Basically, it's like you just take pictures and it pumps out a QR code. It's just it's very simple, but he's built a cool tool. And he just always says people follow systems that they helped create. And so there is a little bit of a magic psychological trick that you play, which is you make the team feel involved with the creation of the system. And look, there are times. By the way, this isn't system building by committee. It's not a democracy. I'm not asking for everyone's opinion. There are lots of times where you go, look, this may not be as popular, but we have to install this system because this problem, like we're having inventory walk off the job site all the time. We need to get better. Like we need to do this. We need to fix this. So I'm not saying that you need to sort of like ask everyone, hey, is this okay if we implement this system? That's not what I mean. What I mean is there's a little trick that you can play, which is you're going to build this system anyway. What can you do along the way to make that person feel like they had input on it? And it could literally be as simple as, hey man, I'm thinking of installing this checklist. Can you read this with me for a second? Is there anything you would add? No, there isn't. So you like this too? Okay, cool. Like those little touches, when it comes time later on to actually install the thing, they're going to feel like they were consulted. And in a lot of times with change management, that's what this is. It's like same thing with brainstorming. Sometimes what you're doing with brainstorming, you're not actually trying to get ideas. You're trying to build consensus on a thing that's going to happen anyway. And you want people to feel like they were involved. So I feel you might hear that and say, well, I'm like playing a psychological trick on someone. And maybe in some way you are, but look, at the end of the day, like you're trying to run a business, you are trying to sell ideas to people. You're trying to sell better ways of doing things to people. I'll take all the tricks I can get. So I feel like that's been really effective for us.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's a good way to end it. That was a banger.
Cool. Let's wrap.
Nice. Well, first and foremost, I'll just say, Benji, thank you so much for being on. It's a pleasure having you on. You made this super easy. And just want to cheers you. So cheers your bubbly.
Cheers. Thanks, Benji.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is really fun. I'd love to come back.
Cool. Well, obviously go check Benji out on Contractor Evolution. Anywhere else you want people to reach out, Benji?
www.btacademy.com. B like Benji, T like Thomas, academy.com. That's our main business, where if you want to get business coaching and work with other landscapers, work with other builders, whatever you are, I'm sure we have a group for you. You can do that. And then Contractor Evolution is our podcast every Wednesday on every platform. You can find us.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks again, Benji. Appreciate you being on.
Peace, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, man.